He told her she was nothing without him. 10 years of marriage erased by one text message from his new, richer, younger fiancée. He left her with crippling debt, a box of broken dreams, and a single cruel piece of advice: know your place. But he made one fatal mistake. He never imagined that her place would be at the top on the arm of the one man who could destroy him. This is the story of how Alice Hayes lost everything only to find that the billionaire who wiped her tears used diamonds. The end of Alice Hayes's marriage didn't happen with a shout. It happened with the quiet, efficient snick of a high-end minimalist lighter. Matthew Thompson, her husband of a decade, lit a thin cigarillo, a new obnoxious habit he'd picked up. They were standing in the living room of their Park Slope brownstone, a home Alice had poured her soul into restoring the original crown molding and sourcing vintage herringbone floors. "You're just not ambitious, Alice," he said, the smoke curling around his face. He had the same face she'd fallen for in college, but it was hardened now by something she'd mistaken for maturity. It was, in fact, just greed. "I'm moving at a certain velocity, and you're ballast." Alice's hands were slick with dishwater. She'd been cleaning up after the dinner he hadn't bothered to come home for. "Ballast?" she repeated, her voice small. "Matthew, I put my architectural degree on hold to support your MBA. I managed our finances, I networked for you, I built this home. And I'm very grateful." He said the words as empty as the U-Haul boxes stacked by the door. "But I've been headhunted by Vance Capital. And as it happens, Isabella and I." Alice's stomach evaporated. Isabella Vance, the 24-year-old daughter of the Arthur Vance. A girl who'd been photographed at the Met Gala wearing a dress apparently made of spun gold and entitlement. A girl Matthew had sworn was just a key professional contact. "Isabella," Alice whispered. The name felt like broken glass in her mouth. "We're in love," Matthew said, checking his new obscenely large Audemars Piguet watch. "It just happened. She sees my potential. She understands the circles I'm moving in." "And what circle am I in, Matthew?" Alice asked, a dangerous coldness seeping into her veins, numbing the initial shock. He finally looked at her, really looked at her. Not as his wife, but as an asset to be liquidated. His eyes roamed over her worn-in jeans, her faded university sweatshirt, her hair tied up in a messy bun. "You're in the circle I'm leaving behind," he said, his voice void of all warmth. "Look, Alice, let's be adults. This wasn't working. You're happy playing house. I want to own the house, and the one in the Hamptons, and the jet." He gestured to the boxes. "I'm taking my things. The rest is, well, it's mostly yours. I mean, the debt is." Alice's blood ran cold. The debt, Matthew, were stable. We just paid off the loan for the renovation." Matthew let out a dry, pitying chuckle. "Oh, Alice, so naive. I leveraged the brownstone, our equity, to get in on an initial fund with Vance Capital. It was a condition of my new position. It's all in the new portfolio." He paused, then delivered the killing blow. "Our portfolio is now my portfolio, and your name isn't on it." You forged my signature." "I didn't have to," he said smoothly, tapping the ash from his cigarillo into one of her prized ceramic bowls. "Remember that stack of investment papers I had you sign last month while you were busy sketching your little dream houses?" The air left her lungs. Her sketches, her portfolio for the licensing exam she'd put off and put off and put off. For him. "This house is sold, Alice." He continued, the bureaucratic cruelty of his tone more painful than a slap. "It was part of the deal with Arthur. Isabella loved the neighborhood, but she wants to gut the place. Find a new designer, someone professional." He was eviscerating her, one calculated cut at a time. He wasn't just leaving her, he was erasing her. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a vast, terrifying emptiness. "That's the part you're not going to like," he said, picking up his briefcase. It was new. Hermes. Our prenup, the one my father's lawyer insisted on, is ironclad. You get what you came into this with, which, if I recall, was a lot of student debt and a beat-up Toyota. We built a life. She started, tears finally stinging her eyes. No, Alice. I built a life, he corrected her, his voice sharp. You just decorated it, and the new decorator is Isabella. He walked to the door, then paused, his hand on the antique brass knob she had spent a month restoring. The lawyers will be in touch. You have 30 days. Don't try to fight it. You can't afford to. He smiled a thin reptilian gesture. You'll land on your feet. You're resourceful. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the sudden suffocating silence. For a long time Alice didn't move. She just stared at the smoke from his cigarillo still hanging in the air. He hadn't just left her. He had surgically removed her from the life she had built, leaving her exposed, bleeding, and with nothing but the debt he'd secretly racked up in her name. A week later, the first photo appeared on page 6. Matthew Thompson and Isabella Vance clinking champagne glasses on a yacht in St. Bart's. The caption read, NYC's newest power couple. Isabella was wearing a diamond necklace that cost more than the brownstone. Matthew was grinning, his arm wrapped around her waist, the picture of a man who had won. Alice looked at the photo on her cracked phone screen, sitting on a rented U-Haul truck's bumper. Around her were 2 suitcases and a single box labeled sketches. The bank had already frozen her accounts. She was at 34 years old, homeless, penniless, and utterly, devastatingly alone. He was right about one thing. She couldn't afford to fight him. Not in his world. As the late October chill of New York began to bite through her thin jacket, Alice made a promise to the indifferent, smoggy sky. She wouldn't just land on her feet. She would learn to fly. And then she would find a way to tear down the sky he was so proud of. 30 days. 30 days is a long time to bleed out. Alice's resourcefulness got her as far as a tiny 7th-floor walk-up in Astoria, Queens. The ad on Craigslist had called it cozy and full of character. The reality was a 200-square-foot room with a rattling radiator peeling yellow paint and a window that looked directly onto a brick wall. The character was the lingering smell of curry and despair. Her neighbors were a rotating cast of slammed doors, shouting matches, and a dog that never stopped yelping. This was her new life. The legal battle was exactly as Matthew had predicted, short and brutal. His lawyer, a shark from Skadden Arps named Mr. Kroll, systematically dismantled her. The prenup was indeed ironclad. The leveraging of the house, a mutual investment decision. Kroll had argued, producing the papers she had signed. The debt was marital, but the assets were premarital and protected. Ms. Hayes, Kroll said, his voice dripping with condescending pity in the sterile mediation room. Mr. Thompson is being incredibly generous. He is not countersuing you for the depreciation of assets you managed. She walked away with $5,000, what Matthew called severance, and her personal belongings. He even kept the dog, a golden retriever named Buster, who Alice had raised from a puppy. Isabella adores him, his lawyer's email read. It's better for his stability. Alice's architectural licenses had lapsed. She had no recent portfolio, no professional references that weren't a decade old. Her degree was from Cornell, but in this city, that meant nothing without connections. And Matthew had been her only connection. So Alice Hayes, summa cum laude, the woman who could see the soul of a building, became a waitress. She found a job at a high-end frantic bistro in Midtown called L'Atelier, a place that catered to the very people she used to call peers. It was a special kind of torture. She wore a starched black uniform, her hair scraped back, her hands, once deft with drafting pencils, now raw from carrying scalding plates and polishing silverware. She'd serve men who looked just like Matthew with women who looked just like Isabella. They'd complain that their Voss water wasn't cold enough, or that the foie gras was uninspired. Alice would smile her new dead-eyed waitress smile, say, "Right away, sir," and die a little more inside. Her paycheck evaporated before it hit her account. First, the deposit on the apartment, then servicing the minimum payments on the credit card debt Matthew had left her with. She ate the leftover bread from the restaurant kitchen and walked the 2 miles to the subway station to save the bus fare. Shame was a constant physical ache. She'd stopped calling her parents who were retired in Florida. How could she tell her father, who had been so proud of her, that she was a 34-year-old failure serving cocktails to finance bros? The digital ghost of her old life was the most brutal. Matthew and Isabella were everywhere. Their engagement party was a multi-page spread in Vogue. The theme was modern royalty. Isabella wore a custom Oscar de la Renta. Matthew, in a bespoke Tom Ford tux, was quoted as saying, "I finally found my equal. My life didn't truly begin until I met Isa." Alice read the article on her phone during her 15-minute break, huddled in the restaurant's back alley next to a mountain of reeking garbage bags. A tear, hot with anger and humiliation, dripped onto the screen. She was invisible. He hadn't just erased her. He had written a new, better story over her, and the whole world was reading it. One rainy Tuesday night in November, the restaurant was slow. Alice was polishing glasses at the bar, her mind drifting to structural integrity and load-bearing walls, anything but her life, when he walked in. Not Matthew. Someone worse. Arthur Vance. Isabella's father. He was with a group of men, all loud, all expensive. Alice's heart hammered against her ribs. She turned, hoping the shadows of the bar would hide her. "You girl waitress?" Alice froze. Arthur Vance was snapping his fingers at her. She turned back slowly, keeping her eyes down. "Yes, sir. What can I get for you?" "A bottle of the 96 Lafite, and be quick about it," he barked. She retrieved the bottle from the cellar, her hands shaking so badly she was terrified she'd drop the $4,000 bottle. Her manager, a weaselly man named Jean-Pierre, watched her like a hawk. She presented the bottle. "A 1996 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, sir. An excellent choice." She recited the vintage notes from memory, a leftover skill from the dinners she and Matthew used to host. Arthur Vance looked up, squinting at her. "Do I know you?" "You look familiar." I have one of those faces, sir." Alice mumbled, her hands steady as she worked the corkscrew. "No," he mused. "I know. You're Matthew's girl. The first one. Alice." He didn't say it with malice. He said it with the casual indifference of a man identifying a piece of furniture. The entire table went silent. Alice felt the blood drain from her face. "So," Vance continued, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, "this is where you landed. Good for you. Honest work." He turned to his friends. "This is Matthew Thompson's ex-wife. My daughter's fiancé. Talk about trading up, eh?" The table chuckled. Alice's skin was on fire. She wanted to pour the deep red, priceless wine all over his smug, entitled face. She wanted to scream. She wanted to vanish. Instead, she finished the pour with a perfectly steady hand. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Vance?" she asked, her voice a chillingly calm monotone. He waved a dismissive hand. No. Run along." Alice walked back to the bar, her spine rigid. She could feel their eyes on her back. She could hear their laughter. She went into the staff bathroom, locked the door, and slid to the floor, biting her fist to keep from screaming. This was rock bottom. Not just poor, not just alone, but a public joke. A cautionary tale. The before picture in Matthew and Isabella's perfect after. She stayed there until her knuckles were white and her breath came back. She stood up, splashed icy water on her face, and looked at the woman in the cracked mirror. The woman with the red-rimmed eyes and the cheap polyester uniform. "He doesn't get to win," she whispered to her reflection. "He does not get to win." She walked back out, finished her shift, and on the long, cold walk home she made a decision. She was done mourning. She was done being a victim. The next day she cashed her meager paycheck. She spent half on rent and bills. With the other half she didn't buy groceries. She went to an art supply store in Soho and bought a new set of high-quality drafting pens, a T-square, and the most expensive professional-grade moleskin sketchbook they had. That night, for the first time in months, Alice Hayes didn't cry. She designed. The winter was a blur of 16-hour days. From 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. she was, "Alice, your server." She smiled, she upsold, she dodged Jean-Pierre's wandering hands, and she swallowed her pride so many times she could no longer taste it. But from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. she was Alice Hayes Architect. She'd nurse a single cheap coffee at a pret-a-manger for hours. Her new sketchbook spread open her laptop, a refurbished model she'd bought with her first full paycheck running design software. She was rebuilding her portfolio from scratch. She designed impossible, beautiful things. Cantilevered glass houses clinging to cliffsides, public parks woven into the fabric of skyscrapers, sustainable microhomes for the very neighborhood she now lived in. The work was fierce, angry, and brilliant. It was the best work she had ever done. She started a new LinkedIn profile. She reactivated her old student account on Behance, an online portfolio site. She uploaded her new stunningly rendered concepts. She got a few likes from other designers in India and Brazil, but in New York she was still a ghost. Then came the catering gig. L'Atelier's catering arm was handling a high-end pop-up event. Jean-Pierre, who loved to reward his most broken-down employees, assigned Alice. "It is at the new Stryker Tower in the penthouse," he sniffed, handing her the briefing. "Do not embarrass me. These are very, very important people." Alice knew the Stryker Tower. Every designer in the world knew the Stryker Tower. It was a pencil-thin, 80-story spear of glass and steel in Midtown that defied gravity. It was the brainchild of Dylan Stryker. Dylan Stryker was not old money like the Vances. He was not new money like the tech bros. He was next-generation money. A self-made recluse, he had built Stryker Holdings from nothing, focusing on architecture that was less about luxury and more about legacy. He was known for two things: his impossible futuristic buildings and his utter contempt for the press. He was a myth. There were only a handful of photos of him online. The event was an Innovation in Architecture gala. Alice was assigned to the champagne bar. The penthouse was a triplex, and the party was on the top floor. It was a raw, unfinished space. But instead of drywall and insulation, the raw space was a 3-story high atrium with 360-degree views of Manhattan. The stars felt close enough to touch. Alice was in hell. She was surrounded by the starchitects she had idolized, people whose books were on her nightstand. And she was the one handing them crab puffs. She kept her head down, her tray high. Champagne, champagne. The hours ticked by. Her feet throbbed. Her fake smile was plastered on. She was on autopilot, weaving through a dense cluster of men in bespoke suits when a man stepped backwards directly into her path. There was no time to react. The man, built like a linebacker, slammed into her. The entire tray of 15 champagne flutes went airborne. Time slowed down. Alice saw the arc of pale gold liquid. She saw the flutes spin. And she saw them all crash in a spectacular, deafening explosion of glass and Veuve Clicquot onto the chest of one man, the man who had been stepped into. The entire 5,000-square-foot room went silent. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of champagne from the man's suit. He was tall, with a shock of dark, unruly hair and eyes so pale blue they looked like ice. He was wearing a simple black Brioni suit that was now completely, irrevocably ruined. He hadn't flinched. He just stood there, dripping, looking at her. Alice's life flashed before her eyes. She would be fired, sued, blacklisted. Jean-Pierre was already hyperventilating in the corner. I am, sir, I am so terribly—" She stammered, her hands flying to her face, as she did the one thing she'd brought for herself. Her new moleskin sketchbook tucked into her apron flew out and landed open at the man's feet. The man looked down, not at the shattered glass, not at his $10,000 suit. He looked at her sketchbook. It had fallen open to her latest design, a breathtaking, innovative design for a floating, self-sustaining tidal energy plant that looked more like sculpture than a utility. His security detail was suddenly there, 2 men in sharp suits. "Sir, are you all right?" The man didn't answer. He bent down with surprising grace and picked up her sketchbook. His fingers, long and stained with ink, were surprisingly gentle. Alice tried again. "I'll pay for the suit. I don't know how, but I will. Please, I'm so sorry." The man ignored her apology. He was flipping through the pages, past the tidal plant, past the skyscraper park, past the micro homes. He was completely absorbed. The entire party, the most powerful people in New York, was watching them in stunned silence. He stopped on a page. It was a simple, quick sketch, a redesign of the very penthouse they were standing in. She had done it on her break, frustrated by the uninspired use of the central load-bearing columns. In her sketch, they were transformed into a light-filtering forest of steel and glass. He looked up from the book. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. His icy blue eyes weren't angry. They were electric. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was quiet, a low, gravelly rumble that cut through the silence. I'm Alice, the waitress, sir." "No," he said, tapping the sketchbook. "Who is this?" That's me, sir," she whispered. The man who had bumped into her, a red-faced developer Alice recognized, finally spoke. "Dylan, my apologies. This clumsy girl, I'll have her fired at once." Dylan Stryker didn't even look at him. His eyes were locked on Alice. "Don't fire her," Dylan said, his voice dropping another octave, making the developer flinch. "Get her a new tray." He turned back to Alice. He closed the sketchbook and handed it back to her, his fingers brushing hers. The contact was like a small electric shock. "This sketch," he said, tapping the cover. "The columns. It's a good solution. The current engineers are idiots. They say it can't be done." "It can," Alice said, her voice finding a sudden, surprising strength. "They're not accounting for the lateral stress distribution. If you use a triple helix support structure within the beams and anchor them to the subfloor, you can open the entire core. You could, She trailed off, horrified. She was lecturing Dylan Stryker on his own building. Dylan Stryker smiled. It was a small, dangerous, devastating smile. "I know," he said. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a black metal business card and pressed it into her hand. "My suit is ruined. You're going to have to pay for it." Alice's heart sank. "Sir, my assistant Anya will be in touch. She will schedule a time for you to come by my office and discuss your payment plan." He then turned his security detail, parting the crowd, and walked away, leaving Alice standing in a puddle of champagne, holding a business card that felt heavier than gold. Arthur Vance, who had been watching the entire exchange from across the room, looked confused. Then, for the first time that night, he looked nervous. The next morning, Alice was fired. Mr. Stryker's office was very clear, Jean-Pierre said, not meeting her eyes, as he handed her a small envelope with her final pay. "You are not suited for the service industry. He paid for the damages, the champagne. He said he would be handling your employment." Alice walked out of L'Atelier into the bright, cold morning, her mind reeling. Handling her employment sounded ominous. She looked at the black metal card in her hand. It was impossibly heavy. It had only a name, Dylan Stryker, and a single phone number. She called it from a payphone. She didn't want the call traced to her cell, a ridiculous paranoid thought. A voice answered on the first ring. It was female, crisp, and sounded like it could organize a military coup before breakfast. "Anya Petrova speaking." "Hello. My name is Alice Hayes. Mr. Stryker gave me this number. About a suit. There was a pause. Alice could hear the faint, rapid click-click-click of a keyboard. Ah, Ms. Hayes. You're in the schedule. We've been expecting you. Mr. Stryker is free at 3:00 p.m. A car is waiting for you at your home address. My home address? Alice stammered, looking around the grimy Astoria Street. Yes, the light gray Audi A8 at the corner of 34th and Steinway. The driver's name is McHale. He'll bring you to the main office. Please be prompt. The line clicked dead. Alice turned. A pristine tinted Audi was parked at the corner, invisible to everyone but her. This was insane. The ride was silent. McHale didn't speak. They glided from the grid of Queens into the heart of Manhattan, pulling up not to the Stryker Tower, but to a quiet, unmarked black granite building in Soho that Alice had never noticed before. The lobby was a cavern of cool gray limestone and shadows. Anya Petrova was waiting. She was a tall, severe woman in a black Armani dress. Ms. Hayes, this way. They didn't take an elevator. Anya led her down a hallway through a set of heavy steel doors and into a space that made Alice's heart stop. It wasn't an office. It was a workshop. A massive 2-story studio filled with drafting tables, 3D printers, and architectural models that looked like they were from 50 years in the future. The walls were covered in blueprints, sketches, and material samples. Dylan Stryker was at the far end arguing with a 3D model on a holographic projector. He was wearing jeans and a simple gray t-shirt that stretched across his shoulders. He looked more like a construction foreman than a billionaire. Anya, tell me again why I'm paying the Renzo piano team, he said, not looking up. This is derivative. It's boring. You're paying them because they are Renzo piano Dylan, Anya said, her voice softening slightly. And your 3:00 p.m. is here. Dylan turned. His ice blue eyes landed on Alice. He dismissed the hologram with a wave of his hand. Ms. Hayes, thank you for coming. Coffee. No thank you, Alice said, clutching her portfolio to her chest. She had brought it just in case. Good. Coffee is a waste of time, he said, striding over. He was an intimidating presence, radiating energy and impatience. Let's talk about your debt. That suit was a one-of-a-kind, bespoke. It's going to be very, very expensive to replace. Mr. Stryker, I can set up a payment plan, my last paycheck. Don't be ridiculous, he snapped, but not unkindly. You couldn't afford the buttons on that suit with 10 years of your waitress salary. No, your debt is not to me. It's to your own talent. He pointed to her portfolio. Is that new work? Yes. Show me. For the next hour he sat with her at a massive worn wooden table. He didn't just look at her designs. He interrogated them. Why this angle? The light refraction is off. This material. Do you know the thermal expansion coefficient of titanium-plated ceramic? It's clever, but it's not honest. This curve, it's hiding a structural flaw, not celebrating it. Alice, for the first time in years, felt alive. She fought back. The curve is necessary to diffuse the wind shear. If I'm honest, as you say, the building will whistle. The thermal coefficient is irrelevant if you use a nano-insulation layer, which I've accounted for in the budget. Page 4. Dylan stared at her. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, real laugh that echoed through the studio. Anya, she put a budget on a building that whistles, he roared. He turned back to Alice, his eyes glittering. I like you. You're not scared. I'm terrified, Alice admitted, her voice shaking. But I'm more terrified of working at L'Atelier for the rest of my life. Good. Fear is a motivator, he said, his face turning serious. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over Soho. I have a project. A small one. A problem. He pointed to a large physical model on a table. It was a new luxury condo building for the waterfront in Dubai. It's a beautiful building. It's also sterile. It has no soul. My clients are unimpressed. They say it lacks a story. He looked at Alice. The gala last night. The penthouse you sketched. You gave it a story. You're a storyteller who uses steel and glass. He gestured to a small empty desk in the corner. Here's my offer, Ms. Hayes. You will work off your debt to me. This desk is yours. You have 1 week. Redesign the lobby and the entrance of the Dubai project. Give it a soul. Alice stared at him. A week? Is that a problem? No, but what's my compensation? She asked, emboldened. Dylan raised an eyebrow. Compensation. I'm giving you a desk. I'm giving you access to my software, my printers, my team. I am giving you a chance. If your design is good, we'll talk compensation. If it's bad, the waitress uniform is waiting. And if it's brilliant? Alice asked, her chin high. Dylan smiled that dangerous smile again. If it's brilliant, I'll buy you a new suit. He turned to leave. Oh, and Alice. Yes. Anya has an advance for you. You can't design for Dubai looking like you live in Queens. I do live in Queens, she said. Not anymore, he replied. Anya, find her one of the corporate apartments in the Stryker Tower. I want her focused. 1 week. Starting now. He walked out, leaving Alice in the middle of the most advanced architectural studio in the world, her head spinning. Anya was already on her phone. A car will take your things from Astoria to your new apartment. 24A. It has a view of the park. Your keycard is here. Your starting advance is $50,000. It's on this debit card. Now what do you need for your desk? Pens, paper, a different colored chair. Alice looked at the desk, then at the model, then at the debit card. $50,000. I need coffee, Alice said, her voice firm. A lot of it. And I need the structural blueprints for the Dubai project. The real ones, not the client-facing mock-ups. Anya smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. I'm going to like you. Alice didn't sleep for 7 days. She lived on caffeine and adrenaline fueled by the sheer, unadulterated joy of creation. The corporate apartment in the Stryker Tower was a palace in the sky, all white marble and floor-to-ceiling glass. But Alice only used the shower. She spent her nights in the Soho workshop wrestling with the Dubai lobby. The problem, she realized, wasn't the design. It was the intention. It was designed to impress, not to welcome. Alice threw out the entire concept. The client wanted a story. She gave them one. Drawing on the history of Bedouin culture and desert pearls, she redesigned the lobby as a journey. She used water not as a sterile water feature, but as a living, breathing element that flowed from a central oasis-like courtyard. She used beaten brass, not high-shine chrome. She designed a massive, intricate 3D printed mashrabiyah screen that would cast shifting geometric shadows across the limestone floor, tracking the sun's path. It was bold, it was expensive, and it was the best thing she'd ever designed. On the 7th day, she printed the final renders and placed them in Dylan's office. She didn't wait for his approval. She went back to her new apartment, collapsed, and slept for 18 hours. She awoke to 27 missed calls from Anya. She rushed to the workshop, her hair still damp, convinced she was fired. Dylan was in the main studio on a conference call with a projector. A group of men in traditional thobs were visible on the screen. I agree, Your Highness, Dylan was saying. It is a masterpiece. It's exactly the soul the project was missing. The man on the screen, who Alice vaguely recognized as a member of the Dubai royal family, nodded. The designer, this, A. Hayes. Who is he? Dylan looked up and saw Alice standing in the doorway looking terrified. He smiled. He is a she, and she is standing right here. Your Highness, meet Alice Hayes. She is the new head of concept and innovation at Stryker Holdings. Alice's knees buckled. The prince's eyes widened. A woman, mashallah. The pearl divers were often the women. It is a fitting tribute. Ms. Hayes, your work is poetic. We approve the new design. We will wire the additional funds. The call ended. Dylan turned to Alice. Head of concept, she whispered. You can't be an intern forever, Dylan said, tossing her a black Stryker Holdings keycard. Your salary is $400,000, plus bonuses. Anya has the contract. Don't be late for your first day, you're already 2 hours behind. He started to walk away. Dylan, she called out. He turned. Thank you, she said, her voice thick. You didn't just give me a job. You gave me back my life. I didn't give you anything, Alice, he said, his voice soft. You earned it. Now stop being sentimental and get to work. The London project is a mess. Alice's rise was meteoric. The Dubai Pearl Lobby was a global sensation. Architectural Digest ran a 10-page spread. They called her the storyteller in steel. Dylan was a relentless, brilliant, and demanding mentor. He didn't coddle her. He challenged her, pushed her, and in doing so, he forged her into a powerhouse. She was no longer just a designer. She was a negotiator, a leader. She learned to command a boardroom, to tear down a contractor's bad estimate, and to see a project through from a sketch to a skyscraper. She moved out of the corporate apartment and into her own loft in Tribeca, a gorgeous pre-war space she renovated herself. She paid off Matthew's debt in a single bank transfer. She started dressing the part, swapping her waitress uniform for the Row Max Mara and custom-tailored suits. And with Dylan, something else was growing. A deep, unspoken connection. They worked late nights, their arguments about design bleeding into conversations about life. He was the first person to see her, not her potential, not her past, but her. But the past, it turned out, wasn't done with her. The gossip columns had noticed. Mysterious new design star on Billionaire Stryker's arm. They ran photos of her and Dylan leaving a site inspection, their heads bent close together. In an office at Vance Capital, Matthew Thompson stared at one of those photos. His life had not been the fairy tale he'd expected. Isabella was beautiful, but she was vapid, demanding, and incredibly expensive. And her father, Arthur Vance, treated Matthew like a glorified errand boy. But this was an insult he could not ignore. Alice, his Alice, the mousy, compliant wife he had discarded. Now she was this sleek, confident, powerful woman. And she was with Dylan Stryker. Jealousy, hot and acidic, consumed him. But then another thought emerged. A colder, more calculating one. Vance Capital was in trouble. Arthur had over-leveraged on a bad real estate deal. The banks were circling. Their one lifeline was a massive city-sanctioned urban renewal project in Hudson Yards, and the lead developer on the project, Stryker Holdings. Matthew saw an opening, an in. He called Alice's new private office number. Her assistant, a very efficient young man, put him on hold for 10 minutes before Alice's voice came on the line. Matthew? Her voice was ice. Alice, wow. You sound great. Listen, I know things ended badly, but I've been following your success. It's incredible. You're incredible. I always knew you had it in you. What do you want, Matthew? A meeting, he said, injecting a fake humble tone. For Arthur, for Vance Capital. We want to partner on the Hudson Yards project. We have the political connections, you have you have Dylan. It's a win-win. I'm not in charge of partnerships, she said. Come on, Alice. We both know he listens to you. Just one dinner. For old time's sake. Let me make my case. Please. I miss my friend. Alice was silent. He thought she'd hung up. Fine, she said. One dinner. L'Atelier. 8 p.m. Tomorrow. Matthew beamed. L'Atelier. The place she'd waitressed. She was sending a message trying to show him how far she'd come. It was perfect. Pathetic, but perfect. The next night, Matthew arrived first. He watched Alice walk in. She was wearing a midnight blue Tom Ford dress that was both professional and devastatingly beautiful. Her hair was down. She looked like a queen. "Alice, you look—" "Matthew, let's not," she said, sitting. She didn't look at the menu. "I'll have a glass of water." Jean-Pierre, the manager, scurried over. "Ms. Hayes, a pleasure. Mr. Stryker is not with you tonight." "Not tonight, Jean-Pierre," she said kindly. The manager bowed. "Of course. Anything you need." Matthew watched his jaw tight. "So," he said, "you're a regular." "I own the restaurant now," Alice said, simply, her eyes flat. "Dylan and we're part of an investment group that bought the entire chain last month. I'm restructuring their brand. Jean-Pierre is being reassigned." Matthew's blood ran cold. "Alice," he stammered. I'm sorry. For everything. The way I left. Arthur. He pressured me. Isabella. It was all about the deal." "Is that what this is?" she asked. "A deal?" "No. It's me telling you I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. She's not you, Alice. She's shallow. All she cares about is her Instagram." "And you're a man of deep moral character," Alice said, her voice dangerously quiet. I'm a man who's in trouble," he admitted. "Vance Capital is sinking. If we don't get this Hudson Yards deal, we're done. Arthur will be ruined. I'll be ruined. They'll fire me." He reached across the table, grabbing her hand. She flinched, pulling it away. "Please, Alice. You're the only one who can help me. Talk to Stryker. Tell him we're a good bet. Just give me this one chance. For the 10 years we had." Alice looked at him. The man she had loved. The man who had destroyed her. He looked pathetic. His new watch was too big for his wrist. His suit was trying too hard. He was weak. "I'll see what I can do," she said. Matthew's face lit up with a desperate, pathetic relief. "Alice, thank you. I knew you wouldn't. I knew you were still the good, kind person I didn't say I would help, Matthew," she interrupted, standing up. "I said I'd see what I can do. The truth is, Stryker Holdings has been monitoring Vance Capital's debt for months. We were curious." "Curious? What? What do you mean?" "I mean," Alice said, dropping a few bills on the table for her water, "you shouldn't have leveraged a failing company." Matthew's face went white. What are you talking about?" "Vance Capital isn't just in trouble, Matthew. It's insolvent. The deal you're referencing, the bad real estate. You overpaid. By about 30%. How could you know that?" Alice smiled, and for the first time it was the same dangerous smile Dylan Stryker had. "Because," she said, "the shell corporation that sold you that bad deal was mine, or rather a subsidiary of Stryker Holdings that I manage. We bought the debt, bundled it, and sold it to the one firm foolish and desperate enough to buy it yours." Matthew looked like he'd been shot. No, that's illegal." "It's not. It's just smart business. You taught me that, Matthew. Leverage your assets. You just didn't realize that your biggest asset was me." She leaned in her voice a whisper. "Arthur Vance is ruined. And you, Matthew, you're the one who signed the papers. You're the one who championed the deal. When this goes public tomorrow, who do you think he's going to blame?" "Alice." "No. Please." He was begging now, his eyes wide with terror. "Know your place, Matthew," she said, her voice velvet and steel. "This is my circle now." She turned and walked out of the restaurant, not looking back, leaving her ex-husband to drown in the ruins of the life he'd tried to build on her bones. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The Wall Street Journal headline the next morning read, "Vance Capital collapses, fraud and mismanagement alleged." The article detailed a series of disastrous high-risk investments culminating in the Hudson Yards overleverage. The SEC announced an immediate investigation. Matthew Thompson's name was mentioned as the portfolio manager who signed off on the final fatal deal. Arthur Vance, in a desperate attempt to save himself, threw Matthew to the wolves. He publicly fired him for gross negligence and fed the press stories about Matthew's reckless ambition and unvetted deals. Isabella Vance's Instagram went silent. 2 days later, a gossip site reported she had fled to a wellness retreat in Switzerland, and the engagement was indefinitely postponed. Matthew was ruined. He was toxic. He was facing legal action from Vance, from the SEC, and from a dozen other investors. His assets were frozen. He was in a single stroke more destitute and reviled than Alice had ever been. Alice read the news in her sun-drenched Tribeca loft, sipping coffee. She felt quiet. It wasn't the giddy rush of revenge she'd expected. It was the calm, clean, satisfying click of a lock falling into place. It was justice. "You're quiet," Dylan said. He was standing in her doorway, having let himself in. Their relationship had shifted from professional to personal in the slow, inevitable way two forces of nature collide. He was holding a garment bag. "I'm just processing," Alice said, gesturing to the news on her tablet. "He did it to himself, Alice," Dylan said, walking over. He looked at the headline. "You just handed him the rope. He was the one who tied the noose and kicked the chair." "I know," she said. "It's just strange to be on this side of it." "This is the side you belong on," he said. He kissed the top of her head. "Now put the past away. We have the future to attend to." He dropped the garment bag on her sofa. "What's this?" "The future. It's black tie," he said. "The Architects Guild Gala is tonight. You're the guest of honor." "I am. They're giving you the Visionary Award for the Dubai project. I'm just your arm candy." Alice laughed. "You are the least arm candy person I have ever met." "Get dressed, Hayes," he smiled. "We have a party to crash." The dress inside the bag wasn't a dress. It was a weapon. A custom Schiaparelli gown in a deep sapphire blue. It was both architectural and fluid, with a bodice that looked like it had been sculpted from a single piece of titanium. Alice was zipping it up when Dylan came into her bedroom. He stopped. "Well," he said, his voice rough, "that'll do." "It's a lot," Alice said, suddenly nervous. "It's perfect," he said, "but it's missing something." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a long velvet graph box. Alice's breath caught. "Dylan, no, you've done too much." "Shut up and open it," he said, his eyes soft. She opened the box. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a necklace. But necklace was the wrong word. It was a river of diamonds, massive pear-cut and emerald-cut stones flowing into a central staggering canary yellow diamond the size of a robin's egg. It wasn't a gift. It was a statement. It was a coronation. Matthew once told Isabella's family that they traded up when he left me for her." Alice whispered, her fingers tracing the cold, brilliant stones. "He said she had diamonds." "He was wrong," Dylan said, taking the necklace from the box. His hands were warm on her neck as he fastened the clasp. "He left a diamond for a piece of glass. He just didn't know how to tell the difference." Alice turned and looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger. She was radiant. She was powerful. The diamonds didn't weigh her down. They were a suit of armor. The gala was at the Frick Collection. The room was a sea of black and white, a who's who of New York's elite. When Dylan and Alice walked in, the room didn't just go quiet. It hushed. This wasn't the mysterious new designer. This was Alice Hayes, head of innovation at Stryker Holdings, wearing the Stryker Canary Diamond. It was a declaration. She was giving her acceptance speech, a smart, funny, and gracious speech about the future of sustainable architecture, when she felt a ripple in the crowd. A disturbance. A man disheveled and frantic had shoved past security at the door. He was yelling, "Alice! Alice, you have to help me!" The room turned. Security was moving in, but the man was faster. It was Matthew. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same suit from their dinner, now stained and rumpled. His eyes were wild. He was a man on the edge. "Alice!" he screamed, his voice cracking. They're taking everything, my apartment, my car. I'm ruined. You did this." Dylan stepped in front of Alice, a silent, immovable wall. "Matthew," Alice said, her voice amplified by the microphone. It was steady, cold. "You're making a scene." "A scene?" He laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "You destroyed my life, and you're worried about a scene. You bitch. You did it on purpose. That whole deal. It was you." "Yes, it was," Alice said, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. "But why, after everything I loved you? You loved my support," Alice said, stepping out from behind Dylan. She was no longer hiding. "You loved my connections. You loved my ability to make you look good. And when you thought you found someone better, someone richer, you threw me away. You left me with nothing, Matthew. You told me to know my place." She walked to the edge of the stage, the diamonds on her neck scattering light across Matthew's ruined face. I made a mistake," he sobbed, his bravado crumbling. He fell to his knees. "I'm sorry, I'll do anything. Take me back, Alice. We can start over. I'll divorce Isabella." The crowd gasped. It was pathetic. It was grotesque. Alice looked down at the man kneeling at her feet, the man who had held her future in his hand and crushed it. She felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just release. "Take you back, Matthew," she said, her voice quiet but carrying. "Why would I do that? You're a bad investment, and I don't make bad investments anymore." "Please," he whispered. "I have a new life, Matthew," she said. "A new job, a new home. And as for my tears," she reached up and touched the massive yellow diamond at her throat. "They've been handled." She turned her back on him. "Security, please remove the ballast." As Matthew was dragged out screaming and sobbing, Alice turned back to the crowd. She raised her glass. "To the future of architecture," she said, her voice ringing with absolute unbreakable confidence. Dylan Stryker, standing in the front row, wasn't just smiling. He was beaming, and he was, for the first time in his life, in awe. The gala cemented Alice's status. She wasn't just Dylan Stryker's woman. She was Alice Hayes, the visionary. The woman who had in front of 300 of the city's most powerful people calmly and surgically dismembered her past. Life was no longer about survival. It was about building. Alice and Dylan were a formidable team, professionally and personally. Their partnership was wildly successful, with Stryker Holdings now building entire neighborhoods under Alice's sustainable urbanism philosophy. Their personal relationship was a quiet, strong space. Dylan's gifts weren't jewels but respect and funding. He backed her design for a new community center in her old neighborhood. The Stryker Canary Diamond was retired. Her new diamonds were the blueprints for the Hayes Wing at Cornell and the Alice Hayes Grant for Women in STEM. 2 years later, Alice was on a site visit for her most ambitious project, a revolutionary carbon-neutral tower. Dressed in a hard hat and boots, she was arguing with an engineer when her assistant Leo ran over. "Ms. Hayes, you need to see this." He held out a tablet. The news alert wasn't about zoning. It was a small article from a New Jersey paper, "Former Finance Manager Sentenced." She read it. Matthew Thompson had finally been sentenced. Not for the Vance Capital fraud he'd cut a deal blaming Arthur Vance. Instead, he received 18 months for a string of petty crimes, check fraud, and credit card kiting. He was living in a Secaucus motel, Leo read, and was arrested trying to use a fake credit card to buy a bus ticket. Alice stared at the grainy, haggard mugshot. The handsome man she married was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed, defeated stranger. He was unrecognizable. "Do you want to make a statement?" Leo asked. Alice handed the tablet back. No statement. She turned to the engineer. Right. The wind shear at 600 feet. Show me the data again. The engineer snapped back to attention. Alice didn't spare Matthew another thought. He wasn't a villain. He was irrelevant. A typo in a previous draft of her life. That evening Dylan met her at the new home they were designing together upstate. She was sketching by the fire. I saw the news, he said, lacing his fingers through hers. About Matthew. I know, she replied, not looking up. How do you feel? Alice paused, considering. The betrayal, the rage. She realized it was all gone. I feel, she said, tapping her pencil on the paper, like this support beam is in the wrong place. It's interrupting the flow of the room. It needs to go. She erased the line with a firm, confident stroke. The page was clean. Dylan watched her, his heart full. You're right, he said, looking at her design. It's much better without it. It's perfect. Alice smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder, and continued to draw the blueprints for their new life. She had been left for a rich girl and saved by a billionaire. But in the end, she had become the architect of her own magnificent and priceless future. Alice's story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclamation. It's a reminder that your worth is never determined by the person who discards you. Matthew saw her as disposable. Dylan saw her as a diamond. But in the end, Alice learned to see herself as the entire mine. What do you think was Matthew's biggest mistake? And what do you think Alice's next power move should be? I read all your comments, so let me know below. If you were inspired by Alice's journey from heartbreak to the head of the board, please show your support and hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own power. And most importantly, subscribe and ring that notification bell. We have so many more stories of justice and triumphant transformation to share with you.